A man by the name of George Edward Moore, a towering figure in philosophy during the 20th century, left an indelible mark on ethics and metaphysics. His meticulous analyses of language and concepts revolutionized philosophical inquiry. Yet, this legacy is complicated by his troubling views on race and imperialism. Moore's writings, while celebrated for their intellectual rigor, reveal a darker side to his thinking. This dissonance between philosophical brilliance and moral blindness demands our attention. We must grapple with the uncomfortable reality that even the most celebrated minds can harbor deeply flawed beliefs. Moore's philosophical contributions are undeniable. His work on ethics, in particular, continues to shape contemporary debates. His exploration of moral concepts like goodness challenged existing philosophical frameworks. His meticulous approach to language, dissecting the meaning of words, exposed hidden assumptions and ambiguities. This analytical rigor, applied across various philosophical domains, cemented his status as a giant of 20th century thought. However, his legacy is marred by views that are difficult to reconcile with his intellectual stature. Moore's support for British imperialism, articulated in his writings and letters, casts a long shadow over his legacy. He saw the British Empire as a force for good, spreading civilization and enlightenment. This perspective, deeply rooted in the era's prevailing ideologies, reflected a profound blindness to the realities of colonialism. Moore's inability, or perhaps unwillingness, to see the inherent injustices of empire remains a troubling aspect of his life and work. Moore's defense of British imperialism stemmed from a complex web of beliefs. He saw British rule as a benevolent force, bringing progress and civilization to the uncivilized corners of the world. This paternalistic view, deeply ingrained in the European psyche of the time, rationalized the subjugation of entire peoples and cultures. Moore, blinded by his own cultural biases, failed to see the inherent violence and exploitation embedded in the colonial project. He argued that the British Empire, unlike other empires throughout history, was driven by a moral imperative. He believed that Britain had a duty to uplift and enlighten the less fortunate races. This sense of moral superiority, a hallmark of colonial thinking, allowed Moore to justify the often brutal realities of imperial rule. He saw British colonialism as a force for good, spreading education, technology, and supposedly superior forms of governance. Moore's arguments, however, rested on a foundation of racial hierarchy. He believed in the inherent superiority of the white race, a view that permeated European thought during his time. Modern scholars have not spared Moore from scathing critiques regarding his imperialist views. They argue that his defense of empire, however deeply rooted in the prevailing ideologies of his time, remains morally indefensible. They point to the overwhelming evidence of colonial brutality, exploitation, and cultural destruction as irrefutable proof of the inherent evils of imperialism. Moore's blindness to these realities, they argue, exposes the deeply flawed nature of his moral reasoning. Critics also challenge the intellectual coherence of Moore's arguments. They point out the glaring contradictions between his commitment to individual liberty and his support for a system that systematically denied freedom to millions. They question how a philosopher so attuned to the nuances of language and logic could fail to see the inherent hypocrisy of his position. Some scholars go further, suggesting that Moore's philosophical work, particularly his focus on individual morality, provided a convenient escape from confronting the systemic injustices of his time. Post-colonial theorists, in particular, have offered some of the most incisive critiques of Moore's views. They argue that his defense of empire relied on a Eurocentric worldview that positioned Western civilization as the pinnacle of human achievement. Moore's racial attitudes, a stain on his legacy. Moore's views on race, like his defense of imperialism, reveal a deeply troubling aspect of his legacy. While he did not explicitly endorse the virulent racism prevalent in some circles during his time, his writings and letters reveal a belief in the inherent superiority of the white race. He saw racial differences not as mere variations in human appearance, but as indicative of deeper intellectual and cultural disparities. This belief in racial hierarchy, however subtly expressed, formed the foundation of his support for colonialism and his blindness to its inherent injustices. More's writings often portray non-European cultures as primitive and childlike, lacking the intellectual and moral sophistication of the West. He saw the spread of Western civilization as a necessary step in the advancement of humanity, failing to recognize the value and complexity of the cultures being subjugated. This paternalistic view, deeply rooted in colonial ideologies, allowed More to rationalize the often brutal realities of imperial rule. He saw colonialism not as oppression, but as a form of benevolent guidance, a perspective that ignored the voices and experiences of those living under colonial domination. George Edward Moore's legacy presents a stark dilemma. How do we reconcile his significant contributions to philosophy with his deeply flawed views on race and imperialism? This question is not merely of historical interest. It has profound implications for how we engage with the past and how we understand the enduring legacies of colonialism in the present. Moore's case reminds us that even the most celebrated intellectuals can harbor dangerous biases, and their ideas, however influential, should be subject to critical scrutiny. The enduring stain of imperialism on Moore's legacy serves as a warning against uncritical reverence for intellectual authority. It reminds us that the ideas of the past, however groundbreaking or influential, should not be accepted uncritically. Instead, we must engage with them critically, questioning their underlying assumptions and exposing their potential biases. This process of critical engagement is not about condemning historical figures, but about understanding the complexities of their legacies and the ways in which their ideas continue to shape our world. Moore's case also highlights the enduring impact of colonialism on contemporary thought. The ideologies that fueled colonialism, including racism, cultural superiority, and the justification of violence, continue to resonate in various forms today. By understanding how these ideologies shape the thinking of someone like Moore, we can better identify and challenge their manifestations in our own time. Contextualizing Moore, a necessary but insufficient act. Some argue that judging Moore solely through the lens of contemporary morality is unfair and biased, and, as well, if you look for the bad in everything, you most certainly will either find it or create it. They contend that we must contextualize his views within the prevailing ideologies of his time, a time when imperialism was widely accepted and racial hierarchies were rarely questioned. While acknowledging the historical context is undoubtedly crucial, it cannot serve as a shield to deflect criticism or absolve Moore of responsibility for his beliefs. Contextualization is essential for understanding the historical development of ideas and the social forces that shape them. It allows us to see how even the most brilliant minds can be influenced by the prevailing prejudices of their era. However, contextualization should not be misconstrued as justification. Recognizing that racism and imperialism were pervasive during Moore's time does not excuse his complicity in upholding those systems of oppression. Furthermore, contextualization alone fails to account for the voices of dissent that existed even during periods of widespread acceptance of harmful ideologies. The dangers of ignoring the past. Moore's legacy as a warning. Moore's legacy serves as a potent reminder of the dangers of ignoring the uncomfortable truths of the past. By brushing aside his troubling views on race and imperialism, we risk perpetuating the very ideologies that fueled colonialism and continue to shape our world today. Ignoring history does not make it disappear, it merely allows its legacies to fester and re-emerge in new and often more insidious forms. Moore's case demonstrates how easily harmful ideologies can permeate even the most enlightened circles. His belief in the inherent superiority of Western civilization and his acceptance of racial hierarchies, while perhaps less overt than some of his contemporaries, were no less damaging. By overlooking these aspects of his legacy, we risk normalizing similar biases in our own time. Furthermore, ignoring Moore's complicity in systems of oppression allows us to maintain a comfortable distance from the ongoing legacies of colonialism. It allows us to believe that racism and imperialism are relics of the past, rather than recognizing their continued impact on our institutions, our systems of knowledge, and our everyday lives. Beyond Moore, Rethinking Philosophy and Empire. The case of George Edward Moore compels us to look beyond his individual failings and confront the broader relationship between philosophy and empire. For centuries, philosophical thought, particularly in the West, has been intertwined with the project of colonization. Philosophical ideas have been used to justify imperial expansion, to rationalize the subjugation of entire peoples, and to establish intellectual frameworks that reinforce colonial hierarchies. This entanglement of philosophy and empire demands a critical re-evaluation of the discipline's history and its role in shaping our understanding of the world. The influence of colonialism on philosophical thought is evident in the works of numerous thinkers, both past and present. From Aristotle's conception of natural slaves to John Locke's theories of property that justified the seizure of indigenous lands, philosophical ideas have often served as tools of imperial expansion. Even seemingly benign philosophical concepts, like rationality and progress, have been used to create a false dichotomy between the civilized West and the uncivilized West, legitimizing colonial domination. Decolonizing philosophy requires acknowledging this historical entanglement and actively dismantling the colonial frameworks that continue to shape the discipline. Conclusion: engaging with the past, shaping the future. Moore's legacy, marked by both intellectual brilliance and moral failings, presents a complex challenge. It compels us to confront the uncomfortable reality that even the most celebrated minds can harbor deeply flawed beliefs, and that the legacies of the past continue to shape our present. Moore's case serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of uncritical reverence for intellectual authority and the enduring impact of colonialism on contemporary thought. However, Moore's story is not simply a cautionary tale. It also offers an opportunity for critical engagement and a chance to reshape our understanding of the past and its relationship to the present. By confronting the uncomfortable truths of Moore's legacy, we can begin to dismantle the enduring legacies of colonialism and racism that continue to permeate our world. This process of critical engagement requires us to move beyond simplistic narratives of heroes and villains. It demands that we recognize the complexities of historical figures, acknowledging both their contributions and their complicity in systems of oppression. Thanks for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode of Philosophical Flicks. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.